Hey, everybody. So today I'm going to be talking about the Boston Straight Pride Parade that happened a couple days ago down in Boston, as it's named. And it was it was an event that drew about 200 people, and they got to preach trolley, idiocy. And there were a bunch of protesters on the other side, largely left-leaning organizations like Antifa, but there was normal folks observing and protesting and even watching from the inside. I'm joined here today by two of my friends who also went down, Richard and Justin, and we're going to have kind of a roundtable discussion about what we saw. Justin, do you want to introduce the concept and who the people were that were behind this Straight Pride rally and how we found out about all this?
Yeah, it takes a short history lesson first off, because this isn't a out of the blue event. This isn't something that just came out of nowhere. We're going to have a Straight Pride rally, y'all. No, to understand where they were coming from and what their history was, you got to know who they are. You got people like Mark Zahady, Samson Rashopi, Michael Coombs. Everyone involved in the organization of the event has a long history of organizing these events. They all started together with a group that was called the Boston Free Speech. That was the name of their group. And they organized a rally November 2017 on the Boston Common at the Parkman Bandstand, where they were going to celebrate free speech. And I maintain to this day, I defend their actions on that rally, that they had the moral high ground. They invited people from Antifa. They invited people from Black Lives Matter. They invited Shiva Ayyadurai, who was a politician running for U.S. Senate as an independent in Massachusetts, happened to be a foreign-born immigrant himself. People talking about GMOs. It was not a single-issue event. It was not a one-sided political event, right versus left, libertarian versus socialism or authoritarianism. There was people from all walks. Bernie Sanders' lawyer was one of the speakers. However, it just so happened to take place about a week after the Charlottesville riots, and it was seen as a kind of a natural successor. People unfortunately identify libertarianism with a niche right-wing ideology, and when you look at the timing of the events, everyone just assumed, oh, Chris Cantwell, he was a prominent libertarian at one point in time. Libertarians are organizing the free speech rally. They must be Nazis, just like him. The mayor of Boston went on television and said, we don't want Nazi hate speech in our city. Next thing you know, Saturday rolls around. I go down to see what's going on. About 150 people managed to get in, show up for the rally. The cops only let about 30 of them actually into the bandstand because they were searching bags, and anyone who had anything that could have been a weapon wasn't allowed in. I'm talking flagpoles, selfie sticks, things you normally bring to a rally. And about 45,000 protesters. The Boston Common was just packed. Nuts, butts to nuts. You standing room only. You couldn't move. It was loud. You couldn't hear yourself talk. I planted myself with Vermin Supreme and Rod Weber for the day, walked around, figured that was the safest place to be because I was a bald white guy. But the ensuing violence at the end of that day during the exfiltration, violent protesters chasing down cop cars and paddy wagons as the Boston police were trying to exfiltrate the speakers of that rally safely, just kind of reinforced the image. That's all that was shown. It was shown that violent response to hate speech managed to shut down an opposing view, and nobody heard a word that was said on the stage. Their YouTube videos were censored. Their Facebook's lives were shut off. There was no cell service around. Nobody could stream or live tweet. And all anybody outside of that bandstand heard was the mayor saying that these were Nazis and that Boston shut them down. So you flash forward a couple months, Boston Free Speech folds. They can't hold another permit. They lose their organization. Several of the original organizers have lost their jobs, been kicked out of school. They've been doxxed, and people have been hunting them down on the internet. Cancel culture at its full effect, to the point where the only people that will associate with them any longer are the alt-right or the neo-fascists and neo-warmongering conservatarian kind of crowds. And they, in my opinion, have kind of taken it to heart as these are the only people that respect our rights to free speech. These are the only people who want to give us the time of day to be equal to them. So fuck it, we're going to run with it. And that's the kind of mood they went with. And they formed a group called Resist Marxism because it was no longer about free speech. It was about triggering the left and trolling the libs. So what better way to eliminate any kind of platform that your organization can have by naming your organization up against your enemy? They're not trying to prove a point. They're just trying to go against a group of people who they happen to disagree with. They started holding a bunch of riots with the intent of triggering violence, with the intent of getting people who identified as anti-fascist to show up and fight them because they wanted to get it on camera. They wanted to put that on Facebook and YouTube because they wanted the hits, they wanted the views, they wanted to troll, they wanted to get the attention. All they cared about was being seen. They didn't care what people said about them as long as people were talking about them. And the natural evolution of that was coming up on the Pride Month, the kind of shift in Pride's history and the way Pride has been celebrated in the past decade, really, away from its historical roots as a protest against government violence towards more of just an open celebration and a party, partially to the fault of the LGBTQ community and our failure to teach the history of the movement to the younger generation. They decided what better way to troll the libs and piss off the left than by raising a straight pride flag in Boston, where Boston allows groups to buy a permit to raise their flag with the city and state and national flag at City Hall, much like our own city of Nashua does. In fact, the Free State Project managed to get the porcupine flag raised at Nashua City Hall a while back. That was actually cool.
For those who don't know, Justin O'Donnell and I both live in the city of Nashua, New Hampshire. We're loosely affiliated with the Free State Project, but neither one of us is an actual signer at this time.
Yeah. When Boston denied their request to raise the straight pride flag, which, by the way, the straight pride flag is the gayest thing I've ever seen. It's a bisecting pink and baby blue flag with just a few little symbols. Hilarious. I think it might have been lost on them, and I'm pretty sure they asked someone who was a gay graphic designer to do it.
It looks very similar to the trans flag in its color scheme, which, hit or miss, but that doesn't seem like what you would be going for if you were trying to troll a group of people and be like, this is the new straight pride thing, if you're trying to make it look real.
Or legitimate in any way, shape, or form. It looks like something out of a cartoon. But the mayor of Boston and the city of Boston rejected their request to raise it with the city flag. And so about 6 months ago, a group of us, you were with us and a few others, we went down to Boston to protest outside of the British consulate against their planned extradition of Julian Assange.
Okay, all right, let's slow down just a second there, because let's not play the pronoun game. It's starting to sound like the city of Boston had a planned extradition against the Julian Assange.
The British consulate. We went to the British consulate to protest against the British government's planned extradition of Julian Assange.
Right.
And the Resist Marxism guys happened to be there. This was an issue we did agree with them on. This is an issue that I still think they were on the right side of. They haven't been on the right side of many issues as of late. This happened to be one of them.
Right.
I'm not a collectivist kind of us against them kind of person, so I'm willing to share a stage and share a platform with people who I agree when that platform is for a specific purpose, and I'm more than willing to stand by them when I do believe that they're right. In this case, they were right, and at the end, after the day was wrapped up, we ended up going to dinner with them.
Let's not pass over the events of that day. So this was back in March, I believe. It's right when Assange was arrested. And the three of us, along with a couple other friends from New Hampshire, drove down to go protest outside. And it wasn't just that members of Resist Marxism were there also protesting outside of the British consulate, but there was also a counter-protest from that same group that Resist Marxism and Free Speech Boston are trying to trigger. North Shore Antifa was there. Richard, was that your first experience with Antifa? Like,
That was my first experience with being yelled at by anyone for the political views that I held. Not being yelled at, but being hounded by a group of very angry, masked individuals who seemed like they were ready to snap at any point. And my view is just that we were there supporting Julian Assange. At a certain point, they started chanting about Chelsea Manning, which led me to believe they didn't know who either of these individuals were.
well, so that's a theme that kind of you get to come back to. Is like, maybe this is why there is this Marxism. People have such a fun time just trolling the left,
Right.
is because there's a certain amount of inconsistency that exists within the Antifa movement, right? If they're chanting "Free Chelsea," well, Chelsea's in prison right now because she's refusing to rat out on Julian Assange.
Correct.
So if you want to support Chelsea, you should be supporting Julian Assange. And to be clear, I shouldn't have to put this disclaimer on here, but I will. I think if they had arrested Julian Assange and extradited him to Sweden to face the sexual assault charges, none of us would have been upset with that. But instead, it's about the journalism thing, right? That's what the arrests have always been about. Am I correct in your positions?
Correct. We were there in support of Julian Assange's journalistic work, not of anything else that he might have been arrested for. He faced sexual assault charges in Sweden. They were eventually dropped. They were brought back up again. If they had just arrested him and extradited him to Sweden instead of trying to bring him back to the government that he's brought out so much dirt on, then I wouldn't have been there, because I don't believe that anyone should evade actual violent charges in another country just because they're a journalist.
Right. Okay, so following this event, the three of us all ended up going back to a bar in Somerville. We had to kind of escape to the T. There was a lot of fear that violence might break out at the Assange rally. And so we didn't really know who we were traveling with at any given point in time. It was just about staying safe. And so we ended up at a bar with Brandon the Bomb and Samson. Justin, can you remind me how to pronounce Samson's last name?
Rachapi.
Samson Rachapi.
He's done a whole YouTube video about it.
About how to pronounce his name?
Yeah, once upon a time, he tried to run for Congress. He failed to even get the signatures necessary to make it on the ballot, but he tried to make a big deal of running for Congress, and that was his whole big shtick. That's when he started doing the first free speech rally. That's probably actually a necessary part of the story. He started organizing that free speech rally as an event for his congressional campaign that never happened.
Okay, so anyway, and you guys jump in whenever you think it's necessary to add something here. The three of us are at dinner with these guys, and we're talking about, isn't it terrible that Antifa treats people this way, which is an easy thing to agree with someone with. And then Brandon asks us if we'd like to help expand his organization, Resist Marxism. And we can't really get a clear answer from him as to what this organization does. We keep asking, but it's just not clear to us. We asked, what's the value in it? It's like, well, we organized however many thousands of people for this free speech rally. And I'm like, okay, but what about the name would allow us to emulate, or why would we even want to emulate that in New Hampshire and wherever else? But wasn't really clear on that. And then Brandon busts out what he thinks is just this brilliant idea. And he says, guys, I want to do a straight pride parade in Boston. He doesn't have the permit for it at this time. He doesn't really have it fleshed out. All he knows is that he wants to have a parade, and he wants Milo Yiannopoulos to be the Grandmaster General, I think is what he said. And it's like, you've clearly chosen a gay man
to be the Grand Wizard.
I was going to say to be the Grand Token, but yeah. Basic concepts. So, what is your reaction to this as Brandon is saying all this to you guys?
I didn't believe him. I've known Brandon for a long time. I've known Samson for a long time. Brandon used to be really involved with the New Hampshire and Massachusetts libertarian communities. He comes to Pork Fest every year. He goes
Trump hat on.
That's new. He comes to Liberty Forum every year. He's come to some of our private parties in the past. He used to be really involved and really vocally libertarian. I remember once me and Brandon joined in together to sponsor, and we both pitched in a lot of money. And we ended up meeting up there. Dan Fishman was there as well, and a bunch of people to sponsor a bunch of students from out of state to come to Boston to meet Ron Paul at a Yale event.
That's pretty cool.
That was a while ago. But I'd seen his kind of dissent since the 2016 election, and I was like, is this for fucking real? I can't believe that Brandon's bringing this up, but at the same time, I can't believe anyone but Brandon's bringing it up.
Right. Well, so that was the thing is we try to tell him it's a bad idea. We tell him, you know, we're not trying to make you out to be the bad guy here. And even we're telling you this is going to be taken as a hate rally and a bigot rally and whatever else. And so just imagine what the people who do hate you are going to say. The people who have already called you a fascist, the people who have already called you a Nazi, who already tried to violently shut down one of your other events. Like, just think about this for a second. You lost your job. How does this help you out in any way?
Correct. And beyond that, we are trying to explain to them that the pride movement, the real pride movement, is not about pride in your sexuality. It's about pride in perseverance and overcoming adversity. They didn't seem to understand it, but when we left the building, we did believe that we had convinced them that the idea was bad.
I actually had this conversation with one of my non-political friends, and I said, you have no idea what I just prevented in Boston. Like, we helped prevent this straight pride parade that would be the dumbest thing that has ever occurred in all of history.
Or so we thought.
Or we thought. I genuinely thought. And literally a day after I sent that text to one of my friends, I see in the news, Boston has approved the permit to allow a parade through their streets. Not really sure what to make of it at that point in time.
I'm still really not sure what to make of it, and I went through it.
Right. So at this point in time, having explained to them that what the original Pride movement was and why their movement, their parade, is a mockery of it and is offensive and is going to only serve to further marginalize the groups of people that original Pride movement was for, we said, this may not be intentionally hateful and intentionally bigoted, but it is hateful and bigoted, and it is going to hurt people. So we came out pretty heavily against, as our local Libertarian Party affiliate. I believe we were probably the first political organization of note to come out against that. And actually, Richard Manzo is the chair of the Southern New Hampshire Libertarian Party, and Justin O'Donnell is on the LNC for the National Party. And these two helped pen what would ultimately be our resolution against this rally, which was passed unanimously by the local affiliate, which I was very proud to do. Yeah, Manzo, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, and in my capacity as vice chair of the state party, I did bring the resolution forward. I understand the objections that the other board members had, but I wish that they didn't view it this way. Their objection was that by even coming out against the straight pride rally, that we would be associating ourselves with it. I don't agree with that view. I do wish that we had been one of the first organizations to condemn it, but ultimately the straight pride condemnation resolution was effectively saying that we agree with their right to have this protest, but that we do not support it because of the affront that it is to the original pride movement.
Yeah. All right. So let's fast forward to actually going down to this parade. Let's take a step back. About a week before we went down to the parade, it was announced Adam Kokesh is going to be speaking.
Yes.
And a bunch of people went out on Twitter and other social media sites to go after Adam very quickly. And in my mind, I'm like, I know Adam's not a bad guy, and this is very outside of left field, so I wanted to call him. But what was your two reactions to that?
Well, I will be open about the fact that I am biased on this topic, where I'm on the campaign team of another libertarian presidential candidate. My first instinct was that we could capitalize it, but my second instinct was that I didn't think that Adam was actually going to get up on stage and say that straight people need to have the same pride that gay people have. I didn't think that he was going to do that. So I advised my candidate, Vermin Supreme, that we shouldn't be hammering Adam Kokesh before we saw what he was going to do, because I didn't view it as costing us anything to keep our mouths shut. I'm glad we did, because he did get up on stage and he, went after both sides. I'm glad that he did that. I just wish that he hadn't given the optic of a libertarian candidate being on the stage.
Well, I think you hit the nail right on the head there, Richard. Is it didn't cost anything to not talk about it until it happened. Right. Where I think that was a big problem going on Twitter, at least in the Twitter sphere or the social media marketplace, where Adam was heavily promoting his attendance at the rally and that he would be speaking and everyone should tune in. We're going to be live streaming. It'll be on YouTube. Make sure you see what we have to say. It's going to be awesome. Libertarians were more vocal than anyone else about how, oh my God, Adam is awful. Adam's terrible. Adam's the worst. This is terrible. Why would you associate with them? First thing I did, I'm seeing a comment thread and people are tagging me in it because I've been a vocal opponent of straight pride since they announced. I started one of the first Facebook events to protest against it. We brought the word out to tens of thousands of people through social media about protesting against the event. And people were trying to get me involved in the event. Before I made a single comment, I sent a text message to Adam Kokesh where I asked, hey dude, what's going on? And I had a back and forth conversation with him over a few days via text message before I chimed in on the Twitter conversation at all. And the only comment I had on there was like, listen, I'm the biggest proponent of this event being freaking stupid and no one should be involved with it. But all of you that I'm seeing throwing this fit here, Adam, he's one of us. He's been involved in the community and the movement for a really long time. He's never been shy about making sure everyone he's ever met, even for 10 minutes, has his phone number. And he's not that great at answering phone calls, but he will answer a text message. Just send him a text and ask him before getting outraged here. And if you really think it's a problem that somebody that you're associated with is being involved, by attacking their involvement as a reflection on your association, then you're actually giving attention to your association.
Fair enough. So ultimately what Adam did, and I recorded another podcast with him about this, was his plan the whole time was to go on stage and attack the culture war and attack the straight pride organizers and maybe go after a little bit of the idea of the counter protests as well. So the three of us knew that going into it, that this is what he was going to do. So let's fast forward a little bit to the three of us getting to Boston and then getting to the ultimate site of the rally. We didn't go along where the parade was, but we get there and there's like a socialist organization that's having their own type of like pride rally. Justin, you know more about this than the rest of us. Can you explain who these people were?
The first protest against the first people that were there when we showed up.
Yes,
it was just like what I did. There's a woman named Monica Cannon Grant. She's a professional activist. She's the lib that they wanted to troll. She's the person that they wanted. She's the embodiment of the culture war movement that they're upset about. Every protest I've been to, no matter what side I've been on, every major one, she only shows up if she knows it's going to be media and news cameras. But she's usually always leading things, and she's always in opposition to something. In the past, she has, I've heard her demands that white protesters move to the back so that black action isn't distracted against. I've heard her tell people they aren't welcome to speak there because they aren't Democrats or they aren't members of the Democratic Socialists of America. At one point, after the kerfluffle of a violent outburst at the free speech rally in 2017, me and another really close friend of mine, we were kind of fleeing the scene for our own safety, as me being a bald white guy wearing a camo hoodie was not the safest thing in the world. And we ended up fleeing down an alley into what we discovered was later the entrance to a facility known as Encuentro 5, Boston's social hub for socialist learning, where they were organizing the protest, handing out vests. Everything was labeled. There was union organization, Teamsters. They were handing out flyers. They were distributing protest signs for people to hold and handing out pamphlets with what chants were going to be chanted and when, so people knew what to chant along with.
Super grassroots, super expensive and well funded. That was all I could think of, and they were very well organized. And a lot of the people were coming in on buses. Like, I shit you not. There were like Greyhound buses being chartered, pulling up, and people were piling out. Like, okay, who's the volunteers? Okay, you guys get the vests. You're organizing this group. Go that way. Here's your chant cards. We're going to start this one at 1, this one at 2, this one at 3. But like, you could take lessons about how to run a protest from these people because they're literally professionals at it. It's what they get paid to do. And those are the only times I've ever seen her are at those events. And usually, oddly enough, the only times I've ever tried to interact with her was when I was also protesting at an event and I was trying to share common ground with people who I normally politically oppose and am political opposition with. And not a single second of courtesy or recognition was given to me or granted me. And it was like, you're not one of us. Get out of here. They don't care about real equality or inclusion. They care about making sure that they're in control of the narrative. Right. Okay. Was there anything else early on with us getting there before the Straight Pride Parade actually got there that struck you guys that you want to talk about?
Well, we saw a couple people who perhaps didn't fit into that crowd as well as we did, and as we were told multiple times, we didn't really fit into the crowd either. There was a gentleman holding a Gadsden flag, and if you don't know what that is, but you probably do, given the podcast you're listening to, it is a yellow flag with a segmented snake on it, a snake on it that says "Don't tread on me," and this is commonly seen as a libertarian symbol, but it has been used by people in the more conservatarian branch who aren't totally racially friendly.
Nope.
And There was another gentleman who arrived to preach God to the protesters of the rally, saying that God could save them from being gay, God could save them from being bisexual, God could save them from being transsexual, and we were watching on as this took place, people fighting with them verbally and just generally. The initial pre-protests went off without a hitch. We were lucky to not be caught up in any violence at that point, because they were in the middle of the crowd. They very well could have been targeted violently, given the fact that they were very outnumbered, and the protesters were very angry.
Okay. So going forward a little bit, we see the straight pride people finally come in. We run into Vermin Supreme because he's apparently been running along the straight pride parade as they've been going, just screaming at his microphone, douchebag pride, yes. Douchebag pride. And so we finally ran into him. Our whole group is kind of coming together. Yeah. So from that point in time, most of the straight pride people kind of continue to walk around the Boston City Hall, City Plaza, and we decided to go around the other direction because we think it'll be easier to walk down to the entrance and all that. And as we get to the bottom, we see a group of probably about 300 cops in full riot gear. I've never seen that before in person, so that was a little jarring for me, because immediately I was like, oh, this is not just a security force. These people are ready to go if things need to be gone. Like, if they need to go, they're ready to go. Justin and Richard, and then Adam Kokesh's cameraman, Vermin Supreme, and then Rod Weber, Vermin Supreme's cameraman, run into the median to go take pictures, yell at the police. I stay on the other side because I'm just like, I'm not gonna mess with this. I'm just staying on the sidewalk. But yeah, from that point on, the Straight Pride Parade comes around the corner, walks past all of them, and they start to interact with the primary force of the counter protest. And that's kind of when all pandemonium kind of struck out. Justin's been in those situations before. Richard and I really haven't. Richard, what was going through your mind when those two groups first started coming together?
Well, this actually is kind of interesting because as the parade walked by, they were being followed by a small contingent of police, and I somehow ended up on the wrong side of the fence with the parade, and I had to walk backwards against the police and quickly explain that I'm not supposed to be here. I'm on the other side to get let through. So I get back to the other side, and we're walking along. It's the group that's been described, and at that point we start seeing insults being hurled by Antifa and the more left-leaning contingent of this protest force, and the Straight Pride Parade, which included Milo. At a certain point, Vermin ran up to Milo and introduced himself, essentially, and was quickly shoved away by one of Milo's security team, and ended up on the ground on his back, and he stood up. We started moving back along with the protests. We were asking when the bank would foreclose on Milo Yiannopoulos' hat, and he said that it was an article of his work, so that they couldn't take it from him. And at that point, it was just basically the meeting of the two sides. We were looking at insults being hurled. We were looking at threats being made. We were looking at chants of "Boston hates you," "Nazis go home," and at that point, the protesters, they're on the other side of the fence. The parade's trying to go into the staging area, and the cops are vetting people to be let in. And I'm sure Justin has a great story about this part.
Right.
Yeah. So that was actually really fun. I was with a small group of protesters. One of our friends, Steven, who wasn't there for the protest at all. He just wanted to hear the speeches and make up his own mind. And he wasn't involved with any side, so he just wanted to get in and listen to what was being said. But there was also a few reporters out there, members of notable press outlets like the Boston Globe and the Herald, and some other mainstream media organizations who were trying to get in to document the rally. And the sergeant's like, nope, sorry, can't let you in. Nobody's getting in. You need credentials. And at which point one of them's like, I'm clearly press. Here's my ID badge. I work for the Boston Globe. And the cop's like, nope, not good enough. You need credentials issued by the group. And I'm like, what's a credential? I just chime in. At this point, I'm pissed. I'm like, what do you consider a credential? He's like, it has to be issued by the group. I'm like, but this is a group that's claiming to be supporting free speech when one of the basic tenets of the First Amendment is freedom of the press. And you're telling me that you get to dictate what is and is not press based on credentials? That's a violation of our First Amendment. At which point, one of the organizers comes over and we're all arguing back and forth about what is and is not press and who is and is not press. And the organizer's like, I'm here to vet people and say who can come in. And who's like, first he's like, I'm like, I'm press. I just yell at press. And the organizer points to me, Steve, and feels like, you're good, you're good, you're good. At which point I realized, shit, as the sergeant grabbed me by the shoulder and pulled me through the checkpoint. And next thing I know, I was in the straight pride rally.
That's an interesting place. Right. So, Justin, can you talk a little bit? Did you hear many of the speeches while you were in there?
It was a wide range. So the ones I heard before I got kicked out, which is another story.
Yep.
But they were, honestly, I was shocked. And I was shocked because that morning I had been having a conversation with a reporter from The Guardian. And I was talking to her via text. She wanted to interview me, but we couldn't meet up because she was stuck behind the barricade at the earlier protest, and we were separated and we couldn't meet up. So we were talking via text the whole day. And personally, I prefer to do interviews by text because if it's taken out of context, I have screenshots. But one of the things I told her, she was asking what my impressions of people on both sides were, what I thought everything was going to be like. And I told her that I think everyone on both sides is misguided about who's opposing them and who they're opposing. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I'm pretty sure there's no racists or homophobes or Nazis in there.
There's a couple.
We'll get to that. I'm pretty sure that it's just a bunch of socially conservative, right-wing people who are kind of upset about being the minority in Boston. A political minority, not a social minority. And will feel left out because they don't understand the history of what they're opposing. And I'm pretty sure that not everyone on the other side of things is a violent communist agitator as they're claiming they are inside the straight pride rally. I believe that if
I would know that they're not all that because I met several of them. Many of them were nice. Some of them are people that we know to be a little violent at times.
Everyone's a little violent at times when you push the buttons the right way or give them a reason to. But some people's definition of what's a reason to is the problem. But I told the reporter, I'm like, I really think that if these barriers weren't so far apart and the people took the chance to listen to each other and that both sides actually had a conversation, they'd find more middle and common ground than either of them believe.
Yes.
But then I listened to the speeches.
Oh, God. Well, see, I agreed with you, too, if we go back to, like, the Assange rally where it was like, yeah, right. We heard the free Chelsea rants. And I'm like, yes.
Free her, too. Yes, like, yeah, her, too, yes. Okay, we'll add that one in. But no, and then I heard the speeches, and holy crap, the super happy Fun America guys went out of their way to like trying to dredge the bottom of the barrel of the right-wing movement for this rally. There were speeches that were straight up about how homosexuality is a sin and it's a stain on American values and we need to defend traditional marriage. And this is why our country's falling apart, because we're letting the gays influence our children and they need to be segregated. So this can't happen anymore. And then all of this so-called progress is really just Satan destroying America.
Can you remind me what year it is?
It is the current year. 2019. But and I'm in there and I'm dumbfounded. I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, I gotta correct myself with this reporter. I'm like everything I said was wrong. Like I honest to God thought that this was gonna be like the free speech rallies of the past where they're just mild, mediocre conservatives who happen to like Trump. We're just gonna have a typical Trump rally. Whatever. No. They stayed on issue. They made this about straight pride and they flew people in. These were speakers from Texas and down south. None of them were local. There was nobody local. This wasn't about Boston straight pride. This was how much money can we spend on bringing in some radical kind of hatred.
Where does that money come from?
I have no idea.
Like, I mean, that's the most baffling part of this whole thing, right? Where does the money come from? Like,
I'd assume that some of them have their own money. I mean, John Hugo, who was one of the organizers, he ran for Congress in 2016 as a Republican in the fifth congressional district in Massachusetts, I believe it was, which is mostly Middlesex County, Lowell, down through the Natick area, where I used to live, actually.
This is a national show. Nobody knows Massachusetts geography.
Well, they should if they took a history lesson. Lowell's where they cut small girls in slave labor, spinning things in the early 17th century.
Oh.
Okay. That got dark.
What, you never read the stories? The Lowell Mills?
Well,
there's a baseball team in Lowell called the Lowell Spinners. That's very dark.
Oh. Well, to get back on topic though, to be fair about this whole straight pride thing, as Justin said earlier, the only people who will attach themselves to this group anymore are the bigots and the hateful people, the neo-fascists, the conservatarians, and honestly, they shouldn't be surprised that they are being guilted by association. Do I think that Samson is a Nazi? No, I don't. But I do think that he's hosting events that lend themselves now to being attached to by Nazis.
Right. I think the big takeaway from this is be careful who you associate with and be careful the way you carry yourself. So there's one very interesting talk at Porkfest that Nicholas Sarwark gave about free speech, and his ultimate conclusion wasn't even really around what you are and are not allowed to say. Like, the biggest conclusion he came to was, if you use your speech in a way that's hateful, if you use your speech in a way that hurts people, ultimately you're going to attract other people who do the same thing. And then ultimately there's going to be violent responses back to you, whether that be justified or not, whether it come from the state or other people, whether the state even fills in the void and makes laws to prevent you from doing this stuff in the future. Like, if you use your rights irresponsibly and in a way that hurts people, you're going to lose them. And that's, I think, really important to keep in mind when we look at this straight pride thing. Because some people may be asking, like, oh, what's the point in opposing it? What's the point in giving them any time at all? Well, this is the point, is they're hurting everyone by doing this. Not just themselves, not just the LGBT community, the gender and sex minorities and sexual minorities, but they're going to ultimately hurt everyone if they continue to do the things that they do, and the reactions are the way that any rational human being would expect the reactions to be. All right, so let's fast forward a little further. Adam Kokesh has given his troll speech where he gets done with everyone. And we don't need to touch on this too long. I did another interview with Adam Kokesh, and I don't have planned right now what the order of the podcast release is. So if that's not out, check back in a week. If it is out, go back a week. And so he gets out of that, and he can't get through the police barrier, so he's got to run back around. So now it's pretty much all 7 of us. It's the 3 of us. It's Rod and it's Vermin Supreme and his cameraman Rod. It's Adam and his cameraman Chris. The 7 of us are kind of paying attention to each other, kind of watching where each other are, because we're realizing things are starting to wind down, and the Boston police are starting to get a little antsy. Now, I've never seen police clear out a protest before, but
it's definitely something that takes you back your first time.
Very nostalgic feeling with that one.
It was fun. I mean, terrifying, but it was fun.
No, the first time it's absolutely terrifying, and Jesus Christ, I don't even remember my first time. That's a whole other problem.
There's a whole bunch of jokes there.
Yeah, all of them appropriate too. But this was kind of a new tactic. I hadn't seen them use before. Usually we see them often with the riot shields. They get the plexiglass shields, and they do like a phalanx formation. They march step by step by step, or baton shield, where the riot troopers, the ones on all black full riot gear, will kind of lock armed, march like a phalanx, but with no shields, but with batons out and pressed to form kind of a gate and push people as they're marching forward. And those are incredibly effective ways to kind of push a crowd and move a crowd. I've never seen them use bicycles before.
Yeah, they were using bikes.
That caught me off guard a little bit, but it honestly, as a photographer,
it works pretty well.
Yeah, as a photographer who was trying to get up and under and get good angles of shots, having a bike to lean on made it a little bit easier.
Oh my God. You're a little braver than I am. I would not have leaned on the property of a police officer.
Yeah, I got pushed for it multiple times. But I got some great pictures to go with it.
Do we want to talk about, like, the 2 pictures you got that are, like, the most important ones you got?
Captain Vesty McSprayerface, as Twitter can call him.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
I can't pronounce his name off the top of my head, but after I posted the photos, the weaponized kind of internet obsession of the current generation has tracked down this guy based on his rank insignia, helmet number, position within the profile. They like what 4chan did to Shia LaBeouf, Twitter did to find the name of this cop, and they've already identified him by name.
So what did this cop do in the pictures that you took? Because I think it's really important that we talk about the pictures that you got, because they're pretty irrefutable evidence that the Boston police started the scuffle between the counter protesters and the police.
I wouldn't say on their own they're irrefutable, but when you look at like Lizzie, the young girl that we met from Emerson, who was photographer taking pictures and recording video for the Emerson journalism program, she was directly opposite me on the sidewalk, and she took video from an exact 180. Like, she's facing at me and I'm facing at her.
What do the pictures show?
With her video, it's irrefutable. This cop, who turns out is a captain in charge of the bike unit is being used as a barricade. As the protesters kind of start to lock arms and they're just standing their ground and refusing to move, you can see a couple cops are kind of reaching over and through, moving by pulling certain people through, kind of identifying the smaller people, the ones that are going to be less of a threat, and was going to arrest them, detain them, get them out of the way early, the people they could pull. That's a common tactic. Even before, when there's no violence, the cops will cherry pick people out of a crowd to weaken the crowd. But then this guy, and I didn't realize it was happening. I was just trying to get the picture of him face to face yelling at a protester to back up. And as I was taking the picture, the timing was goddamn immaculate. I tried to snap 2 pictures in under a second, and when I looked at them later, I see him raising a hand with a can of mace in it, and then a tenth of a second later, the next picture, he never deployed the mace, but he had clenched his fist around it, and he had punched the girl in the face directly across from him. Within seconds of that having happened, the entire line kind of popped off, went to shit, as I like to say. Mm-hmm. People started reaching for her. Another cop next to him, it was a black cop who was with the state police, not the Boston police. He had a different uniform on. And another Boston cop, the state police officer immediately started throwing punches and elbows. He dropped his bike and went over it and started trying to push the crowd back and hitting people as people were trying to pull other cops over the barrier in response. And then the captain, and you can see this incredibly clearly on Lizzie's video, the crowd had essentially dispersed. There was a large gap now as people started falling back because they were getting punched and bruised, and everyone was caught off guard. He just pulls out his can of mace and starts with the kid on the ground. The kid on the ground is not resisting, not a threat to anybody, and just in the face, and just starts walking along the crowd, macing everybody. And then you can see clearly in the video to the point where at that point I had realized we should back up. That it's great to be on the line to get some great photographs. It's great to be able to be on the line to make a stance against an illegal movement or stop the police from brutalizing people. But once it pops off, that's not where you want to be for your own safety. I had started kind of backing up for myself, continuing to take pictures, trying to stay as close as I could that I felt safe. There was a few of us, I believe Adam Kakesh. I didn't see Adam until I watched this video later on, but he was right behind me as I was walking backwards. Steven was there and a few other people. And it's about a 60-foot walk from where we were to where the cop just kind of chased us down to. Mm-hmm. And it's the same cop. He's now the vest, the helmet number, his captain's bars are the same in the picture. I have a picture from a few minutes later as he stalked us down well away from the police line. The police line still 60 feet behind him, and he came after us through the crowd. And I got the picture of him raising the mace to my face as well. Before that was the last picture I got for the next 45 minutes, an hour or so. I ended up being dragged to medics.
So what do you think is the reason that the Boston police decided to engage in this violent manner?
I don't know, and I don't really think I can speak to that. Maybe it was they saw what happened in Portland. They saw what happened in other recent riots where the police were told to stand down and just did stand down, and stuff got out of hand and people got really hurt. But the difference between those events and this event was in those events, the right-wing contingent, so to speak, I hate to use right and left here, but that's what they were and how they self-identified. The right-wing contingent included groups like the Proud Boys and
who are violent,
3%ers, and a bunch of armed militia groups who showed up with body armor of their own and weapons of their own. And they didn't have a contained rally. They were like, we're going to find the left and fight them. And the left showed up with weapons and armor and medic crews and like, we're going to fight them. And the cops said, fuck it, we're out. And just kind of let it happen.
That's kind of what Portland is now.
But and in Boston, it was different because this was a planned central event. The right-wing crowd had a central location where they were organized, and they exited that location at the end of their permanent hours on the other side of City Hall from the protest.
Right. They were nowhere near
the protest at all, and the protesters had no way of being any close to them. Now, granted, had there been no cops there at all, do I think that maybe some of the protesters might have sought out to get violent with the right? Probably. Some. A minority. A small number. Sure. There was absolutely some people there that were kind of itching for a fight.
Right.
And looking for it. But it was not the crowd.
But the right... The straight pride people had pretty much dispersed the other direction at that point in time.
At the orders of the police.
So what was, at that point in time, had the police just left?
There would have been nothing left to protest.
Exactly. Right. Why didn't the police just leave? Like, that's...
I don't know. I can't speak to their motivations, their tactics, or whatever their policy manual states for that kind of a situation. I know in past events it's been the same way, and this has been something different in Boston. And I don't know what it is about the Boston police and why they're acting differently than other major liberal cities in the country. But like Providence, when they had an event down in Providence cops said, fuck it, not our problem.
You guys think this has maybe anything to do with the Boston Marathon bombing? Because I feel like Boston maybe has gotten more militarized since then.
I mean, I think it absolutely could, but it's been 6 years since that, and there hasn't been any major incident except for these events, and they are recurring events. There was the Rally for the Republic, which I will correct people on. The Rally for the Republic in March of 2017 was attended by primarily fascist and white supremacists, and was organized by the same people that did put on the Charlottesville rally. There was a different group of people that organized the Boston Free Speech rally. But since it was the same location, same structure, same type of event, same type of schedule, there was an obvious indication that people believed that they were a successor organization. And that's what spawned this whole road we've gone down.
So, all right, I think, well, did you guys think that the Boston police, did it appear to you that they were targeting media, and not necessarily media, but anyone with cameras?
Yes.
Yeah.
That was definitely my perspective on the ground, where they were essentially chasing people at certain points with cameras who were turning and running, and just following the police's orders. And I mean, Rod Weber had his megaphone and was using it to vocalize the order that the police would not vocalize, which was that we needed to move back. He turned around, he started to walk away, directing the crowd. That's what they were trying to get us to do. They chased him down, put him in a chokehold, slammed him to the ground. And that's just something that you saw across the entire event. People with cameras being pepper sprayed, people with cameras being manhandled by the police. And I'm not talking just people from big media outlets with large camera equipment or anything like that. I'm talking people who clearly were using their cell phones to record. And I believe that is partly due to the fact that some of these people had irrefutable proof that the police started the violence.
Yep. Well, that's a good guess, I think. That's a good theory. Like, I would agree with that.
I don't like to make that kind of accusation. I don't know what was going through his head or why he chose to go, but I backed up in a very non-deliberate manner. Like, I didn't pick any specific way when I was leaving the front line and backing up. But the fact is, I ended up way on the left side of the protest against the wall, kind of retreating towards the back of the protest, where the cop that started the initial spraying, who was feet from me and who I was filming in his face on the complete other side of the protest, followed me to that corner.
So we're just going to make, all right. So we'll just, keeping what Manzo said completely out of mind. What we're saying is that a police officer that Justin O'Donnell photographed starting a fight, then chased after Justin O'Donnell to spray him with mace and knock his camera away from him.
Yeah, and honestly, when I came to, and after I got dragged out to the medics way at the back of everything going on, I had no clue where my camera was.
Yep. Somehow Steve had that. I don't know how he got it, but like Steve, I've got Steve and Adam Kokesh against the wall on their backs with mace in their eyes, and Steve has your phone for some reason. And Manzo runs up to me and was like, they got Justin. I'm like, what do you mean? He got arrested? No, he got sprayed. I'm like, we don't know where his camera is. And Steve's like, I had his camera. Don't know how that happened. That was amazing.
Right.
Yeah. But I don't want to make the claim that that was his intention, because that's in my hope for a jury to decide.
All right. I mean, so after that point, everything kind of eventually calmed back down. The police kind of stopped moving once they got everyone up to the corner where Faneuil Hall is. And we talked to some reporters. We talked to some more people who were there who were also protesters. Like, hey, wasn't this really messed up? Yeah, it was really messed up. Mm-hmm. So, do you guys have any parting thoughts on what we've just gone over?
I'm still pissed I didn't get my jalapeno poppers.
All right. So, our original plan going into the night was to go back to the exact same bar where we had this dinner with Brandon the Bomb and Samson. What's his last name again? Rachapi. Because that bar, and I do not remember the name of it, it's at the Assembly Row stop on the Orange Line if you live in Boston, if you're ever in Boston. I can't for the life of me remember the name of the place, but they have these avocado jalapeno poppers, and we had said going into the day, we're going to get those at the end of the night, regardless of what happens. And then Justin got sprayed with mace, and it was like, I don't want anything spicy. We were all kind of sick by the time we got back, but
yeah.
Yeah,
I would say that was one of the most messed up parts of the day. When we were all up in this corner, I heard people remark that children were caught up in the pepper spray or mace, whatever the police were using. And today someone asked me what I thought I got out of going to this rally. And I would say that what I got out of it was perspective on how the police operate in these situations. They're not there to keep the peace. They're there to enforce the peace. And that sometimes includes arresting people, brutalizing people, and hurting people.
But like a 1984 definition of peace.
Right, exactly. Right. We're looking at people being forced out just for using their voice, just for appearing at this rally, just for being near someone at the front of the line. They got maced for no reason. A girl got punched for no reason by a police officer for no reason.
All right. Well, pretty somber stuff, guys. I think that wraps it up for us. Thanks for listening. Please share this podcast with all your friends, and let everyone know you heard us. All right, thanks. Bye. Thank you for listening to the show. Please show the Think Liberty Network your support by subscribing wherever podcasts are found. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter by searching Think Liberty or at think-liberty.com.